Welcome everyone to another episode of the Shaman's Way podcast. As always, this episode comes from the teachings of our amazing friend and shaman in residence, Kriket. We hope you're enjoying these podcasts as much as we enjoy making them, and I'd like to take just a moment to ask you if you would please leave us a rating and a comment in iTunes or whichever podcast player you're listening to us from. Giving us a rating and sharing this podcast with others is the biggest way you can tell us that you like our show. Now, without further ado, on with the episode.
Well, hello, my constant listeners and my semi-constant listeners, and a special hello to my brand new listeners. Thank you for my patience last week, or patience with me last release. It was a re-release on the alchemy of shamanism. I know that you have summers in your countries, and sometimes that time of year gets a little bit crazy busy. Mine was no exception, so I thought it would be best to re-release something that I found very interesting, which is the alchemy one, and hope that you would bear with me and maintain your listening because I have something new to offer you today. This one is, we're going to talk a little bit about doing healing work for others or healing journeys for others. I have had the opportunity to go to different places, and sometimes I don't always, what I refer to in my head is bring the shaman with me. So I leave the shaman at home. Sometimes that seems to be just how to travel slightly. I mean, what I mean by that is like, don't bring all the accoutrements, so accoutrements. So don't bring your drums, I don't bring my rattles, I don't bring my stones, those sorts of things. I travel as light as possible. Why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because we are capable of doing many things without the, our wonderful pieces and accoutrements that we carry and have with us. When we are faced with something that catches us off guard and we wish to do something from a shamanic perspective, sometimes we may feel as though we don't have as much to offer or as much to give in that situation because we don't have all of our tools or paraphernalia. And that is true and it's untrue. But what I would really like to discuss, rather than not having enough tools, is how do you use the tools that you do have for the benefit of others? If you were to ever take a level or a basic introduction to shamanism from the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, it really does focus, that learning weekend really focuses on the differentiation between the upper world, the lower world, the middle world, and then introduces the concept of power animals. In that very beginning and learning class, people are tasked with the opportunity to do a journey on behalf of another person. And in this particular case, it is to retrieve a power animal for a person who you are sharing the class space with. I think that it is implied that you have permission to do journey work like that for somebody else when you are in a workshop. That implies permission from a shamanic perspective or from a healing perspective or from any kind of perspective. So I bring that up for the very simple reason that it demonstrates that the teaching of giving of yourself or giving of your services on behalf of another person is an expectation that modern shamanism, I think, has on its students and on its people who are progressing further along in their shamanic studies. Do I think that it's right or do I think that it's wrong? I don't have an opinion on whether it's right or wrong. What I do have an opinion on is how well you do or do not trust yourself. I believe I've run into far more conversations regarding, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't trust myself to do this, than I have run into conversations of, I know this person has never done this before and I'm very uncomfortable with this person doing this. What I am getting to in that regard is that we often have a lesser opinion of our abilities than the person who is asking or who is on the receiving end of our abilities. We love to put much onus and I guess what's the word I'm looking for? If it's not onus, then we put a lot of stock, into whether or not we can do something for another human being. And I think that it is incumbent upon us to consider how we feel about something, how we feel about our strengths, how we feel about our abilities. But there are very simple journeys that we can do for one another that aren't huge and elaborate. They don't require necessarily a large setup space or a large creation space of a ritual space. I do think that when you're working on someone else's behalf, I do think that it is important to make sure that you have the one or two things available to you that make you feel safe for doing the work. Number one for me is I always have a candle burning. That's very important for me. That's probably the primary. Secondary and also very valuable is, do I have smudge? Because I like to clear a space. Do I need smudge? Absolutely not. Can my prayers clear that space sufficiently to do my work? Absolutely. What kind of journeys am I going to take on behalf of somebody else? The first one that I would partake in or utilize for someone, especially if they have no experience with shamanism, is to do a power animal retrieval for them. Now, what we have talked about here is the relationship between you and the spirits that help you. And that relationship will also extend itself to the ability for your spirits and yourself to work together in order to achieve a particular outcome for somebody else. The power animal retrieval you would do in the situation, especially if you are fairly new to journeying and you don't feel that you have the confidence to not move or not travel without your power animals, your spirit kin with you. You take the spirit kin with you and you let your spirit kin know specifically what the journey is about. Chances are that your power animals and your spirit kin already know what you're there for. However, I feel that in my journey work, it's very important to establish a set relationship or a set outcome for a particular bit of work that we do. For the very simple reason, they may have ideas that I haven't considered. I may have ideas that could come into play in the positive retrieval of someone's power animal or spirit kin, whatever term you choose. I think that it is good to have an open dialogue with your spirit kin because it enables you to continue to build that relationship. I've said this R word many times, and I will still say it because it's still invaluable, is relationship is very important. Relationship builds many different aspects of ourselves. Relationship also builds camaraderie and trust. But that doesn't help us when we're journeying for other people. But it does. But it doesn't really get me along to where I'm trying to lead you. The power animal retrieval is, from my perspective, a very straightforward experience. For myself, it is a journey into the lower world, the world where I would find most of the power animals, most of the spirit kin, many of the different types of teachers I find primarily in the lower world. I'm not going to go into the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. There are also podcasts that I've done that delve a little more deeply into what those three worlds are. In this case, because we are conditioned in North America from this particular, the tradition of core shamanism, the tradition of whatever you're traveling with, that we can do this particular work, and we have the relationship with spirit kin, and it's important to have a spirit kin to help you on this path of understanding self, of acquiring knowledge, of seeking through the worlds. You would travel to I would suggest that you travel to your anchor spot. I realize some people don't use anchor spots, and that's perfectly fine. That's not my reality, but that's yours. And from the place of your anchor spot, then you would journey into the lower world. And you may, during that journey into the lower world, or even at your anchor spot, I'm not sure how your spirit world works, take your power animal down with you to the lower world with the intention of finding a power animal for a friend. Now, the way that I was taught to do it, I was taught to use my physical arm in ordinary reality, and during the journey to take my physical arm and my spiritual arm at the same time and gather that animal to me. And once I have the animal, then we sit up and we blow the animal into a particular person. I don't actually like that way. It doesn't work for me. What I do, and I've talked about this before, is I put stones in my mouth and I suck the essence of whatever I have found in the spirit world into the stone, and then I can continue journeying, know that that energy is completely safe where it is, and when I'm absolutely ready to expel it, then I it into the body wherever it feels like it needs to go. Power animals can go anywhere, depending in the body. You can blow them anywhere in the body, from the crown chakra to the bottom of the feet. I like to get people to sit up, and there are some pieces that come back, or some animals that like to go in your back. So I think that that's important. It's important to have that open communication. However you find it, you are going to, what I like to do is, if I find a power animal, sometimes they just come upon me. Sometimes I'm in the middle of a journey and I'm going to journey for a soul retrieval. And the very first thing that I run across runs across me is a spirit kin for them. And I ask, so are you for so-and-so? Yes or no, or yes, I am. And if the answer is yes, sometimes if I don't have a lot of pressure on me, or perceived pressure, my own sense of pressure, I will then go for the opportunity to say, well, what do you represent? Now, if it's a small animal, as in baby animal or infant animal or, juvenile animal, generally it indicates that the person who I am doing this work for may need to have access to how to play or be more playful. And if I come across a different type of animal that doesn't necessarily coincide with playfulness, I can ask, specifically, what are you coming back for? It's not necessary for you to do that. Sometimes, though, I find that power animals or spirit can come to us at a time or a part in our journey where we need to learn a certain lessons or series of lessons, or about ourselves. When I first received deer, I learned very much about the gentleness of myself, the patience of myself, the in awe of the newness of myself. So that particular spirit kin had many ideas, ideologies, knowings to pass on to me that I truly needed as I step forward on my path. And you may not get an answer. You may not understand the answer, and it may not be for you to understand. So that's one. Another journey that I like to do for others is someone will ask me to do a clearing for their home if they feel that there's negative energy or stuck energy or so on and so forth. What I will do is ask for the address, obviously, because I'm eventually going to go there in the physical. I look for the address. This is my process. This doesn't have to be your process at all. I look for the address. I look for the address then on a map. I prefer a physical map, one that I'm touching and holding, but I have used, online maps as well. I prefer the physical map if I'm doing the work inside the particular city I live in. However, if I'm doing the work and it is far for me to travel, so an hour out of town or whatever, then I won't necessarily have that particular part on the map, although knowing me, I would. But there is that aspect. So do you need a map? Absolutely not. The reason that I need a map is because I'm a visual person and I like to know where I'm going. I like to know how to get there. I have been fooled on more than one occasion, and got spun in circles on more than one occasion trying to find a house because a particular spirit or particular energy in the house doesn't want me to find it. I clued in after the second or third time, but it's happened quite a few times over the span of my life. So that was part of the reason of taking in a map, because if I could find alternative routes and the route that my brain is trying to take me is being thwarted, then sometimes I believe that I have to be a little more cagey and a little more intelligent than the spirit or the mischievous energy that is inside someone's house. If you're not going to the physical location, why am I talking about this? Well, I'm talking about this because journeying to a person's house, if they have indicated to you that they are feeling XYZ in the house and they would like to feel ABC in the house, whatever the symptoms are, whatever the intended outcome is, this is your opportunity to do this. Journey to the house. The first thing that I do when I journey to the house is I meet the spirit of the house. There is a spirit in every single house. I believe it is the living essence of a building, the living essence of a house. We have many different components. We enliven our homes, whether we enliven our homes consciously or unconsciously. When we bring our own energy into a place that is considered to be inanimate, so we enliven it by bringing that in. When we play music, when we sing, when we laugh, when we bring energy and emotion or anger even, we are again informing the house, we're informing the space. I believe that the house has the opportunity to absorb that energy and manifest it in or out. So the spirit of the house is the spirit who has experienced many different comings and goings. So if you're living in an apartment, you have a different spirit living in that house than if you move into your own brand new build. And if you move into your own brand new build, it may bring in some energy of the place where you have lived or the land where you've lived. But that, if you're journeying for a friend or for an acquaintance or for someone who has just reached out for you, that would be the first spirit that I would try to locate, would be the spirit of the house. Ask the spirit of the house, what's going on? What can you tell me? What can you share with me? Sometimes they're upfront and forthcoming, and other times you're stonewalled by silence. There are ways to move into a house. Always remember you have the 4 elements in the house, regardless of whether you're in an apartment or you're in a house. There will always be air flowing through the house, whether it's through a forced air furnace, whether through its fans, whatever the case is, or air, just air that you're breathing. So air is always in the house. Water. If you're in a house, you're going to find all of these things in the same place. So you're going to find fire that runs through the electrical cords and fire that burns in the furnace to warm the house. You're going to find water not only in the taps, but you're going to find water in the water heater that you do have. And you're going to find earth in the wood that makes up the 2x4s that are, within the walls, the concrete on the floor made of ground up stones. You're going to see many different forms of earth. Even the windows is a solid form of water, so we even have a stopped form of water or a solid form of water. So if you're unable to necessarily meet with the spirit of the house, you certainly have options to interact with the spirit of the house just by utilizing the natural things. Most of us live or work or practice in urban areas, and therefore we have to make do with urban shamanism. If you're in a farm and you're going to the farmhouse, obviously you're going to check out the land, but you also do have all of those things within the house, unless it's completely off-grid. And then I don't have any words for you because that's completely out of my line of experience. So what do you do with this information, and why do you journey? You journey to try to figure out if there is a disturbance in the house. You're going to journey to find out if there's any medicine. Medicine doesn't mean, the medicine of the pharmaceutical world, but medicine could be plants. Medicine could be a color. Medicine can come in any number of forms. And does that house need medicine? Does that house need stones around the four corners? Does that property need stones to be buried in the four corners or around the perimeter? So there are many different things that you can find out specifically from the journey. So I'm journeying to find this particular piece of property. I'm journeying to find out what I need to know. And I'm also going to, in that journey, I'm going to stay in the shadows, and I'm going to allow the spirit of the house to give me a story or a movie. Oftentimes when I enter into a house to do some prior work, I will see the activities of the family. If the family gets along, doesn't get along, if everybody likes one another, if nobody really likes one another, or if it's just a pretty great home where things are fairly copacetic. And those are the important points in determining how to go about and helping that house. You could do some, if you're advanced and you know what psychopomp work is, and if you feel that there are spirits in the house that really need to move on, then psychopomp it. Call in the beings that you work with for psychopomp work, or for helping the spirits of the dead crossover, and help the spirit of the dead if there is a wandering spirit in the house. What does that feel like, and how will I be able to move that on? So those are two very specific journeys. So journey for the power animal, journey to clear the house. And what if your friend is feeling ill at ease or ill? We have many tools at our disposal to travel through the body. You may wish to contact the physician or the healer part of the body, and you may journey to the friend. Let's say your friend said, I'm not sure if I'm sick. I've been told I have this, but I just would really like some spiritual set of eyes. Can you journey for me on this? There are many different ways of traveling into the body, but I often find that it is a nice courtesy to ask the spirit of the body or the healing spirit of the body to meet with you in a neutral place and ask the spirit of the body what's going on. Like, this is what I've heard. These are the medical test results. What can you tell me? Sometimes the healing body is very well knowledgeable, and at other times the spirit of the healing body really knows nothing. And we have to accept whatever comes out of that mouth. Take it with a grain of salt and know that you're going to be your own detective. But I think it is important at first to introduce yourself. And remember that not all spirits know the language, and not all spirits will speak the language. And not all spirits have a great deal of self-awareness. Keep all of that in mind. If you are unable or wish to divert or move further into it, to investigate further into the body, there are different ways of entering into the body. If you know that there is a particular, let's say, organ that is being affected, then I would journey to that particular organ. My side of reality is, like a map, I'm going to look up where that part of the body is if I don't know it specifically. I may not know, the entrance of the spleen. I may not know exactly how pancreatitis affects the pancreas and what are the other organs surrounding it. So I'm going to do my own investigative work so that I can understand the function of the body, so that when I go in, I have a bit more knowledge and information to inform me during the journey. There may be times when I see something that I'm completely unfamiliar with, but if I had done my homework in the first place, I wouldn't be guessing. I would say, oh yes, well, I know this is XYZ. If that's not your journey, that's not your journey. If you just want to journey to the body in and of itself and journey through the body and fix it up where you can, that is another aspect to the journey. to journey to the physical body and look at it from an energetic perspective. What does the aura look like? What does the body itself look like? Can you see, like if you are a Reiki practitioner, or if you do other forms of hands-on work, your hands will work in the spirit world, if not just as good as they do in the real world. They might even work far better in the spirit world and be far more in tune with the energy of the body or the energy of the illness. So that's an important thing to recognize and to realize, that you can augment your information and your fact-finding sessions and work it to whatever way that you are doing this. It is highly, highly unlikely that you're going to do much damage, if any damage at all. And I think that in order to ensure your own ease, that you have not done anything wrong, then what I would do is I would journey to my own spirits and say, so what are the parameters? What are the boundaries? What can I do? What can I not do? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? Because there may be limitations placed upon you for what you can or what you cannot do. I know that I have different limitations when I'm been asked to do healing journeys for others. One of the limitations I'll share with you is I have been asked many times over by people whose family members are in a great deal of pain and who have been really begging to cross over. And unfortunately, the body just has, for its own sense of purpose, has to live excruciating pain for X number of days longer. I have journeyed. I have tried many techniques to sever the life course or to shorten the life. But what I have learned, hands down, is that it's not my job to be a death dealer. And I'm not a death dealer. And I don't have the right to negotiate. I don't. That doesn't mean you don't. This is my experience. This may not be your experience. But my experience is that I don't have the skills, and Spirit won't give me the skills, which is fine by me, to be able to exact a end for that particular person who is in a great deal of pain. So that is one of the limitations in doing healing work or exploration work for another person. I think the exploration work and speaking to the disease is very important. So if you have a friend who has cancer, journeying to the spirit of cancer is very fruitful. Cancer in and of itself is really an amoral spirit. It is a being or an energy or a disease that has its very own intention, and its intention is to survive. Its intention is to procreate in and of itself. Not necessarily does it have a very malevolent viewpoint. It doesn't necessarily or always come in with the intention of, I'm going to kill this so-and-so. If that was the case, there'd be many so-and-sos dying of retributive deaths caused by cancer. Get my point? Do you see where I'm going with that? So I think that when we take the opportunity to journey on someone's behalf, especially on behalf of their health, I think you have to also be aware of what your intention is. If your intention in these journeys is to enable the person to have a healthier life, or to communicate with organs that are uncooperative, or to try to determine if there should be a change in diet, or to try to determine if there should be a change in thought patterns or energies, those are certainly the things that one can find out in doing this journey. Do you need to be particularly adept at journeying? Not at all. What I have found, and what I said before and I'll say again, is that spirits bend over backwards to make sure that they can help you as you are trying to help another person. And they find that to be very important. Spirits like to know that you are coming from a place of integrity. Spirits like to know that you are coming from a place of an open heart, an open mind, an open body in order to help somebody else. They bend over backwards. They would like you to be able to help on their behalf or help with their assistance and their absence. A friend, a very wise friend, once said to me, and spirits thank you because without you, they wouldn't be able to do the work on this earth. So I think every single one of us who move out of our own space to move into the space of somebody else to affect change, I think that we are doing the work that we are intended to do and that we have been asked to do and that is important for us to do. So those are, I think, very solid grounds to work with. I think it's important to maintain a state of ethics or to stand in the place where you can access your ethics. What do your ethics say about this? Do your ethics say that I can help a person who has a horrible disease and wants to either find a way out or to find a way to live with it? I think that we can encourage the return of our essence and our health by journeying for our power animals, journeying for the spirit kin, because that can bring us some strength, that can bring us some help, that can bring us some insight. So maybe if you have a sick friend and you're doing a journey to find out more about the body, bring a spirit kin and blow the spirit kin if they are okay with that, if the recipient is okay with that. It's okay to bring in modalities or different ideas or different types of journeys in order to create a wholer sense of health or a more rounded sense of health. And that health can be from the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the physical. Health comes in many different ways. Another journey that I think is very easy and very good to do with someone else is if they have a question. We often turn to, some of us turn to tarot, some of us turn to stones, bones, nuts, and teeth, some of us turn to oracle, some of us the I Ching, and others turn to methods that I am wholly unfamiliar with and not naming off the top of my head. And I think that to do something along those lines, to do a type of bringing in what we can do in order to see a more whole perspective, doing a journey for a question is also a very important way of bringing together the pieces. So one of the questions, should I move? Just as an example. What I would do is I would journey to that person who is there and I would walk a complete 360 around that person. I mean, sometimes you get an answer right away. You have that intuitive insight and someone says blah, 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 blah. And you're like, yes, that's exactly what you need to do because you have the intuition. Some questions are more complex. Some questions don't necessarily come with a yes or no answer. And therefore, a good journey can give us some better insights. And sometimes we get a yes or no answer too. We can utilize our skills as trackers, as seekers, as individuals who just truly want to do help for a friend of ours, that we are going to be able to help them with the journey. Journeys are another really great way of bypassing a person's preconceived notions or a person's own idea of who they are. There's that aspect too. So it is easier for me to get a realistic answer for you because I bypass all the bullshit you've erected in your brain that means nothing to me, doesn't help me, doesn't hinder me. In fact, it's just like dust in the wind. Like seriously. I mean, sometimes you get caught up in a person's ideas or a person's brain, but I think sometimes it takes more experience to recognize when you're being caught in the trap of their thoughts, as opposed to, I'm just going to journey because I'm going to journey. Answering questions. I mean, divination and prophecy has been long considered to be one of the tenements of shamanism. When the anthropologists got together and said, how can we determine what shamanism is? Then we're going to ascribe, these 5 points. And one of the 5 points was the ability to divine or have prophetic abilities. And some of us have that in spades, some of us do not. However, journeying is a different story because we're not relying on ourselves. We're relying on the spirits that are going to help us. You can call forward or set your intention that the person you're journeying for, that their spirits come into play. So if you're asking about a move, so I would walk that full 360 around that individual, and I would see if there were paths jutting out from that individual, or if all the paths were pretty much stayed within the center circle. And then how would I interpret that? Would I interpret that as a person afraid of stepping out of their circle and just wanting me to come back with the answer of no, you cannot move? Or is that person really not sure of which path to go? That's why there's many. Or is that person confused as to, do I take this path here, this one here, this one here? This is where it comes in handy, having a relationship to your spirits and having to be able to have an open dialogue. And this is also where it comes in handy to have a relationship or be on speaking terms with the person's spirit kin themselves, or teachers or guides, whatever the language is that you use and what your friends use, because we have different languages for sometimes meaning the same things, but sometimes also meaning different things, that's for sure. So the ability to ask a question, the ability to journey, the ability to find the answer, whether that answer turns out to pass or not, really, I'm not certain that we can take full responsibility for that, or if things are just, traveling along in that particular way. I don't know. I don't know if we can or not. Sometimes one of the challenges of predictions are that there are 1,000 windows and 1,000 doorways. For me, predicting the future has never been my ballywhack. But I do know that doing this work, doing shamanic work, doing many journeys and honing my skills has led me to be a far more intuitive person than I was, say, even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and most certainly 20 years ago. I think our intuition truly is like a muscle, and the opportunity to build that muscle only comes from the opportunity and the availability to use that muscle. And we only use the muscle if we trust the muscle, but we don't trust the muscle if we don't use the muscle. So we are caught on this spinning wheel of, forever chasing my tail, trying to find the right answer, when in actual fact, if I just turned around and stopped for a second, the right answer would smack me right in the body because it's chasing after me. Those are some of the insights and aspects that I think are good tools to use your journey skills on behalf of others. It's also a nice way to introduce someone who may not necessarily be very well versed in journey work or very well versed in traveling through the spirit world. It may give them a sense of ease or more trust for your abilities, more trust for the world that may be unseen for them. I think that there are many opportunities that we can use our skills for to increase awareness and to increase acceptance of something outside of self. I also think that it is important to recognize that because we do these things doesn't make us the strange people that perhaps others would like us to be put into that narrow category. Journey work is simple, it's safe, it's not threatening, and it enables others to get a glimpse into things which they may or may not have had a glimpse into. So, my constant listeners, my semi-constant listeners, and my brand new listeners, thank you for sharing this time. I know time is a precious commodity. Thank you for taking the time to spend it with me and for ever indulging me with your ear so that I may share some of my insights, warranted or unwarranted, thoughtful or, in the spur of the moment. So you have always encouraged me. You continue to encourage me. And I thank you truly from the bottom of my heart for letting me share my tits and bits of knowledge with you. Until next time.
Thank you again for joining us here on the Shaman's Way podcast. If you have any questions, would like to make a request for a future episode, or if you're looking for other shamanic resources, including free drumming tracks, please visit us at shamansway.net. Until the next episode, be well, everyone.